I have the pleasure of talking to the incredible Dave Huff of Sunshine Brewing out there on the East Cape of New Zealand in the glorious region of Gisborne. How you doing, Huff?
Yeah, it's all good, mate. We're busy making beersies for the good people in New Zealand.
That's nice. Does that that disease thing feel like a little while away now, or is it still sort of lingering a bit?
The COVID thing.
Yeah, you know we don't use the C word here, Huff, but yes.
All right, sorry. Yeah, I mean, it changed things pretty dramatically, really quick, as it sort of happened, as everyone probably's life changed pretty rapidly. We had to sort of change the business model like quick smart, and it went to online sales and home deliveries. And I think we're pretty fortunate here that we're the only brewery in Gisborne and well established, being 30 years old, and we've got some pretty staunch local following. So that helps that we didn't really have to compete with anyone locally. And yeah, online sales, it sort of that took off, and I think that will continue. Sort of people sort of changed the way they buy beer now, and luckily we coming out of the lockdown, we picked up a couple of awards from New World, or the top 30. So we were making beer for
you
that.
busted my topic, Huff. I was going to talk to you about that a little bit later, but no, that's all right, bro. But now we may as well talk about it. Those two beers were Summer Ale and the Stout, right?
That's correct. Yeah.
So just describe the Summer Ale to me, because that can be pretty confusing for people like me who don't know much about beer. But what what I do remember about it though, Huff, is it's delicious. It's sort of got a citrus note that kind of runs through it. It's not completely overpowering. It's a really good sun quashing beer.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm going to give you a bit of beer history here, because I only just learned this myself last week. I was talking to Michael Donaldson, and he'd obviously been doing his research, and apparently the Summer Ale is a relatively new style that was born in England after a heat wave, because a lot of the cask ale was, well, going off because it was too hot and no one really wanted to drink warm beer. So they were basically made a style which sort of was a light malt base, but basically a pale ale. I guess these days we would call that an XPA, and that's kind of a bit of a buzz style. And we could have called it an XPA, to be honest, because in the winter it didn't sell too well last year. But I would say that that's how I describe the style. It's kind of in between a sort of Pilsner and a pale ale. So you've got the light malt base, but you still got the hops. So it's pretty easy to drink. Yeah, and I'd say this is more of a New World version, because it's got New World hops in it. It's not really an English one. So, but it's got the low ABV, 4.5, which is pretty big in England. But and that's the sort of beer that I'm used to drinking, something sessionable when I'm at home, obviously. But, yeah, that's how I describe it.
And the Stout too, Huff. I don't believe I've tried your Stout from
You
Sunshine.
definitely should. I think we sent some to you.
Oh, bloody staff, mate.
And I hope that you've got it on nitro too. I think I sent some nitro, so because it's pretty awesome on nitro. Have you got it?
It must be waiting to get. It's probably in the cool room, mate. We've got at the minute we've got the Mythica Aphrodite Maple on the nitro tap, which is bloody amazing, mate.
That sounds pretty spectacular.
Yeah, but we're not here to talk about Mythica, even though they're good fellas. So this stout of yours, is it sort of an international stout? Is it a black lager stout? What's the truth? What's the truth, mate?
I would actually. So I'll give you some more history, Jason. So actually, there was a stout here at Sunshine called Black Magic, and it did win a trophy back in the day, I think quite a long time ago. I don't know, when I got here, I wasn't too happy with that recipe, and me and Martin, who's my boss, we talked about it, and he really wanted to do a milk stout. I thought it was a good idea. So it's actually a milk stout. It finishes quite sweet. So that's what it is, really.
Yeah, so using the lactose through there, Huff, get that sweetness built up. Using lactose through it, getting that sweetness built up.
Yeah, it's got lactose in it. And to be honest, I amalgamated two styles, and there's such thing as an oatmeal stout. So I chucked some oats in there for good measure.
Nice.
And it's pretty velvety.
Yeah, the oats add a bit more sort of body through the mid palate. Am I right in saying that? And sort of fills it out a bit.
Yeah, it fattens it up. It fattens it up, and so lactose does a similar thing. So those two together.
So for the folks who aren't too familiar with you know lactose and sucrose and dextrose and stuff like that, can you describe to us just quickly what those are and quickly what the differences are between them?
Well, sucrose is just sugar, but lactose is basically milk sugar, and we use it in brewing, like, well, in a stout, for instance. It's been sort of a bit of a craze to put it in hazies and milkshake IPAs, I guess, as well. So it's kind of definitely become a bit of a popular ingredient recently. But it's basically milk sugar powder, and it's unfermentable. So if you put it in your beer, it will make it sweet, unless you, that residual, it will keep the sugar high, the residual sugar, depending on how much you put in, obviously.
Which is what you're really after for the lactose. So you wouldn't make a lactose beer and then chuck the enzyme in it. It would be a waste of time, wouldn't it?
Yeah, exactly. They kind of do the opposite things. Yeah,
nice. Buddy, so just talking about the brewery. So I think it was, you guys used to run an electric fired kettle sort of just before 2019, I think it was. And, you know, electric kettles at the best of times are a difficult bit of kit to use because you can get build up around the elements. So if you imagine a kettle, a normal kettle, for example, if you were to put sugary water in that kettle and boil it, the sugars can caramelize around the element. And if you let that sort of carry on too long, you can start getting sort of a smoky nature or a burnt sort of flavor that can go through beer. So electric elements, while they do a job, are very difficult to take care of. So you guys upgraded to a steam brew, but that ended up being a bit of a drama, I think.
Yeah, you're right. So yeah, when I got here, they had the old brew house, which was like the OG brew house from 31 years ago when the brewery started. It was a bit of an antique, to be quite honest. It definitely ripped me a new one, and it made me a better brewer. I quite enjoyed it, sort of trying to figure it out, because there was quite a few, not just the elements that were a problem. It was the hot liquor had a really tiny, almost kettle-sized, like domestic kettle-sized element in it. So it heated up at like 2 degrees per hour. Oh. So at the end of your brew day, you'd top it up, but you had to top it up with cold liquor, because that was the only thing that came in. You couldn't, the way it was set up, you couldn't bring ambient in. So I sort of worked out that eventually, because you have to clean your elements after every boil because of what you just mentioned, basically. So I started doing a hot caustic CIP, but running it through the heat exchanger at the same time. I've got the cold liquor coming in. I'm heating up the cold liquor. So sometimes the hot liquor you'd come in and it wouldn't be hot enough to mash in. So I kind of solved that problem with cleaning the elements at the same time. So like I say, it ripped me a new one, and I was pretty happy for the new system.
And buddy, those are the challenges, I think, that probably a lot of people don't realize about brewing, is that, you know, a kit's a kit, but every kit has its nuances. And So you've been around, Huff. You know, you're not a baby in this business, and you know, man, the first time I met you was when the.
Hang on, Amy. I'm just talking to Jason.
Hi, Amy.
And he says hello.
So mate, the first time I met you was at the Brewery Britomart, which is, you know, Lawrence is the other founder of the Beer Spot, and that was his original business, microbrewery in town. And I know you were gagging to brew even then. You know, it was just like such a I want it. And so the first question is, did they ever let you get on the kit there?
No.
Okay, moving right along.
Actually, I had a couple of false starts, really. I mean, that was the reason why I was there. I was working in hospitality, and they kind of utilized me as a bar manager there, because that wasn't their strength. Their strength was brewing. And then I got a job at Gale Braith's, and Keith was kind of dressing it up like I was going to get maybe the brewer's job after the legendary, I've forgotten his name now. What was the old brewer at Gale Braith's school?
I don't know. It's not that legendary.
Papa Smith. Anyway, he was sort of dressing it up like I was going to get that job, and then I didn't. So, and then eventually I got a job with Steve. What were you talking about is with the different kits? Yeah, you're completely right. I was kind of fortunate enough when I got there that they were on the old brew system, and that was a similar size to the brew system that and probably similar age to the system that I had here. So yeah, and then not long after I arrived, I learned on that system. Not long after I arrived, there was a new brewery come, which was the beer fountain, which Joe came in as the manager there, and we brewed Liberty beer and Hallertau. So that was a pretty good education. And then since then, I also did a bit of work in Rarotonga for Steve, because he's got a brewery over there, which was a steam system, but not quite as efficient as this one here. But you know, every time you sort of work in another system, you have to figure out some new challenges, and that's what I love about brewing, to be quite honest, is you know, developing new techniques or processes that improve the beer, or the longevity of the beer, or anything really, making life easier.
Yeah, nice, Huff. No, yeah. Mate, we're talking to you because you're our brew buddy at Huapai, the beer spot Huapai. It's on Main Road in Huapai, in the northwest of Auckland. And we have
my old stomping ground.
That is, mate, isn't it? So we have 6 great Sunshine beers on, but let's start with the toppermost of the poppermost, Gizzy Gold.
OG.
The OG, mate. Like that's got to be 30 years on, doesn't it?
31, yeah, that's
right.
Right.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And just a really easy. It's a mid-strength. It's 3.8. It's really approachable and easy, and what we call a transition beer, or a gateway beer. And to have one that's sort of, you know, 31 years old, that's been around and serving the locals around Gisborne and the Cape area there, you know, that's just makes my heart sing, because, you know, knowing that it's been there for so long, it's always been there, and it's always consistent and great. Is it still massive around the Cape?
Of course, mate. So, like you say, that was one of the OGs, and Jerry Maud and the late Jeff Logan set up Sunshine Brewery 31 years ago, and they were basically pioneers of the scene. And back then, there was probably 4 beers available in New Zealand, and from what I heard, they were all pretty rubbish. So they made a craft lager. So I guess they didn't want to go step too far out of the realm and make something outlandish, but it was basically a lager that's made with all malt rather than sort of cheating and using sugar like most of the big breweries do. And yeah, it's got a loyal following. It's the bread and butter of the brewery, mate. It's still our best seller. I mean, there's craft breweries in that have started brewing lagers recently because they've realised it's almost gone full circle. It was all about the pale ales and the IPAs and the big flavours and now there was people were just slating lagers back then, and now people are making lagers and it's making them money. It's like it's an easy sell. But that's one of the things that I love about Sunshine Brewery is we've got the Gizzy Gold, and then we've got Gizzy Green, which is basically a stronger version of Gizzy Gold. It's pretty similar recipe wise. I think it was made originally for someone's wedding or something, and then all the locals started drinking that because it's got to be a bit more drunk, and it's got a bit of a legendary story. I get a lot of the locals telling me that back in the Jeff Logan days, they used to go down there and it was a bit of a roulette beer, so you could get some days it'd be 7%, sometimes it would be 5%, but usually it'd be more than 4.8, which is what it was meant to be. And recently we just rebranded, and at that point I decided that the Vienna Lager should become Gizzy Red. So now we've got the Heritage range, which is sort of branded slightly different. So that's basically your working man's beer, and then we've got the crafties as well, which not many craft breweries can boast, and that's one thing that I really like about working here is we provide pretty much, we've got the full spectrum, which is good, and obviously a pretty smart thing to do as well.
Absolutely, Huff. And look, I just want to talk about Gizzy Green for a bit because, you know,
it's your favourite beer.
Man, look, I love it. So it uses the legendary green bullet hop, which is, you know, synonymous with the beer that supports our national rugby team and stuff like that.
Correct.
And that hop is so distinct and so obvious. So we had an event called Clone Wars. Man, might be 18 months, 2 years ago now, where we got green bullet hop beers in side by side, and a Gizzy Green came out on top, you know, as sort of the most similar, or you know, and it was. But it's great to be able to say to someone who comes to us and says, oh, you know, I like this beer, and if it's a mainstream beer, say, hey, look, we haven't got that, but try this; it'll be really familiar. And once you got them with that, you know, you can sort of start be educating them into other styles. So I think it's super important for all independent and small brewers to have those transitional or gateway beers, and you guys do them so well. So the heritage lineup, I think, is a great idea, and you know, you can push on to the other things like your Pilsner. So I was kind of expecting to have Gizzy Green here in that Pilsner space, but you've brewed a legit, honest Pilsner for that one. Tell me about that.
Yeah, that's a New World Pilsner, so it's just using New Zealand hops, and yeah, it's basically taking inspiration from New Zealand Pilsners before it, like Emerson's, which was probably, well, was the benchmark. So yeah, it's definitely a bit hoppier than the green, but it does what it's actually our second best seller. So you got Gold, and then you got the Pilsner. It's pretty popular around here for sure.
And so a lot of folks don't understand how that those lighter beers, those lagers and Pilsners, actually take a lot longer to make and more complex in the sense that the ingredients don't give you much room for error. And there's nowhere to hide with a light beer, like even a Gizzy Gold or a Gizzy Green or a Pilsner. It's got to be done right, otherwise it's flawed.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. It's because you've got that sort of lean malt base, and there isn't much room for. You've got to have it nice and clean, basically, and that's the case for any lager.
The other, hello.
Sorry.
So Summer Ale, which we talked about briefly, that got in the New World Top 30, which is just amazing, mate. Congratulations. And I know,
Thank you.
Yeah, having talked to you last year, you know, you were itching to get some gongs, you know, and I think that's I think it's super important to sort of, I don't think it's a competitive nature, but to sort of have that ambition and want to be recognized for your work is a really important thing. So I'm glad that's come to you, Huff, and it's fully deserved, mate. So I'm really stoked that you got 2 in the top 30, which is something else, man. So that's a great effort. So you've made a beer called Hicks Break. It's an American pale ale, and I don't know much about the Arcanum hop. What's so unique about that made you want to use it in that APA?
To be quite honest, I've never used it before, and I should probably tell you about the story of how that beer came about. It's kind of in the name. So we're actually making pale ale, and Jose, who's the brewer here, we noticed that the wort was looking a bit darker. So I went and had a look at his malt bags, and he put the wrong crystal malt in. He'd put medium crystal in instead of medium Cara. So I had to make a decision sort of then and there. And this is another thing about brewing, is you have to adapt sometimes. And I was really happy with where the pale ale was at, and I didn't want it to be more maltier. So we decided to make a completely different beer. So yeah, and I had some Atenum out the back, and the reason I had it was I'd like to say I've never used it, but I know it's one of the main hops in Thornbridge's Jaipur IPA. So I was interested in it, and I thought, well, this is a good opportunity to use it. So I completely changed the hop regime, and we upped the alcohol of the beer, and used a lot of Atenum in there. So I think it's real sort of Turkish delight. It's got a real sort of mellow sort of character to it, and I really enjoy it. And it basically, that was because of the malt change. It was going to be a maltier beer anyway, and it's like the opposite sort of to our normal pale ale, which is quite loud on the hops, and quite leaner on the malt. So it worked really well, because it's quite it's almost got a bit of an English kind of quality, but yeah, it's still tropical, but like, yeah, more sort of mellow than most American hops, I'd say.
I knew you'd get it in there somewhere, mate. This, turning an American hop into something English. You guys are all the same, you people from the Yorkshire Dales. Yeah.
So the other thing was, because Joseph's second name's Hicks, and there's also a Hicks Bay up the coast. And Martin insisted that we call it Hicks's Break, so just to rub it in his nose. But to be honest with you, it's been a really good seller, that beer, and people love it. So
it is delicious, mate. It's really well made, as all of your beers are. And Hicks's Bay, which is right on the point of the Cape, is just such a beautiful place to go. It's just incredible. So.
I don't think there's a break up there either.
Hey man, it's just on the label, So, buddy, have you taken up surfing, Huff? Have you gone for a surf or anything, mate?
That's a good question, Jason. I actually went out for the first time on the weekend, so I've been putting it off, and everybody's been sort of asking me, and like. Pretty much everybody in Gisborne surfs, and it's a conversation that I can't join when they're talking about it. So I was getting a bit sick of being left out, but no, and everybody's sort of invited me out to sort of teach me. So eventually I went out in the middle of winter, but I don't feel the cold because I'm from the Yorkshire Dales, and yeah, I caught a couple of waves, mate. I was pretty proud of myself.
Nice.
It tell you what though, it's hard work.
It's very physical, mate. Very physical. And you're not the unfittest fellow in the land, Huff, but it's getting all of those muscle groups together, right? Especially on a board, mate. It's just so it is hard work.
I haven't been doing much exercise because the gym was shut over lockdown. So,
oh man,
I was doing a lot of this, but the old one-arm bicep curls.
The IPA, mate, the Sunshine IPA, a really delicious 5.8. really pretty much down the line. Citrusy, a little bit nutty from the malt character, maybe.
Yeah.
Take us through that.
Yeah, so it's basically what I'd describe as a classic sort of West Coast IPA. Nice sort of lean on the malt. There is a bit of caramel in there, and you obviously pick that up. But it's pretty lean as IPAs go, and it finishes quite dry. We've got 6 different hops in there. I mean, I think on the label it's the 6 American ones, but I think I swapped one out for a New Zealand one when I got here. So we've got a bit of Nelson Sauvin in there, which is always good in an IPA. But yeah, it's pretty easy drinking IPA as IPAs go.
It's very nice, mate, and a nice one to sort of introduce people to the style with too. I think it's, fairly, it's really nicely balanced, and this sort of takes me back to what you were saying before around these sort of transition beers and and lagers and pilsners, and so even 5 years ago, maybe a little bit longer, it was all about the hops, big resinous, piney. You have a swallow of it, the reflux starts. It's all go, and we've sort of found as an industry, I think, what balance means, and we're starting to see better malt characters come through to balance that resinous hoppy nature, and I think that's kind of refreshing. So I guess the question for me from that is that like Pilsner is seen as our beer to the world kind of style at the moment as New Zealanders. Would you go along with that? Do you think that's a representative style for our country?
That's a good question, Jason. Well, I guess it is a style, and I can't think of anything else that, and I mean, you could call something New Zealand Pale Ale, New Zealand IPA, but I definitely think you're probably right there as far as it's probably a more popular style that we've, I mean, I used to live in the Czech Republic actually, and I drank a lot of Czech Pilsner, which was delicious. But I feel like our hops make that style, well, it gives it a new dimension, and I guess it's a lot like the Sauvignon Blanc and grown in Marlborough, gives you that sort of gooseberry and more tropical fruit sort of flavors, and more New World, and I think that definitely happens with the New Zealand hops as well. And I think you're probably right. I would go along with that, as that's probably the best style that those hops fit into. They can be quite hard to work with, and if you're just using New Zealand hops, because they're quite bold and dominant, and I usually use a mixture of those with American hops in most of my other beers, but yeah, I'd say that they work pretty well in a Pilsner for sure.
The other beer we've got on to round out the collection so far, and I'm sure we'll be getting a couple of seasonals, or that stout's hopefully sitting in the cool room waiting to go on the nitro tap. A winner, well, it's a winner when you're in the top 30 of the New Worlds, mate. It's just awesome. Well done, bro. But rounding out the range we have on the taps at the moment is the Red Bus Red IPA. So I always find this style is quite confronting for people, I think, because we have that sort of mainstream beer that's so synonymous with the word red, and to sort of bring an IPA in that's got a way more hop character, and it's a really sort of underappreciated or misunderstood style, I think, the Red IPA. What can you tell us about the Sunshine version?
Okay, well, it's if we're going to get real technical, it's not that technical, but it's a red hazy IPA. So so it's hazy as well. So it's also a collaboration that I did when I was on my I did a bit of a world tour last year, and did a lot of market research around in America and UK, even popped over to Ibiza for a bit. Not much beer drinking going on there, but or good beer drinking. But anyway, when I was in the UK, I did a couple of collabs, and one of them was with Thornbridge Brewery, and we made that beer. And since then, we've made it twice here in Gisborne, because last time it sold like hotcakes, and yeah, it's going pretty well again this time. So those red IPA is kind of like quite a challenging sort of style to make, because usually you'll have a sort of a dominant ingredient. Like you could have a like hop forward beer would be an IPA, for instance. A yeast dominant yeast beer would be a saison, or like a wheat beer. A malt driven beer would be like a stout, for example. But like a red IPA, you've got your malt and your hops that are quite loud, and you've got to get them in balance. So it makes it a little bit difficult to make in that respect. But yeah, it's pretty easy drinking. It's got a real low bitterness. And what we got in there, I think it's got Rewalker, Mosaic, and Amarillo in that one.
Nice. It's look, we're thrilled, mate, to have you have Sunshine on as our brew buddy of the month at Huapai, and I appreciate your time talking to me. Huff, I see you've got the minions scurrying around, you know, around the tanks in the background there. It's great to see things cranking out. And buddy, let's just briefly finish up on the tap room, which opened about a year ago too. Would that be right?
And our tap room's been going, I think, since we've been in this location, which was 5 years ago. But just after I got here, we extended it. So there was a few things that were going on when I took the job. I remember actually coming and telling you about that job opportunity. And yeah, there was a rebrand sort of planned. The brew house behind me was on its way, and we were extending the tap room, which is, I'm actually sat in it right now. So we sort of extended the deck out, and we reclaimed a bit of land from the brewery. So you kind of got a bit of a bubble here of the brewery. You can see.
Nice. That's beautiful.
So yeah, but it definitely was a success, that idea. We've got more bums on seats, and it's a pretty popular hangout in Gisborne. It's definitely my favourite place to drink, but I suppose I'm biased.
If folks are looking to, now that we hope this sort of restrictive lifestyle of ours is sort of coming to an end, where do folks find the tap room in the brewery?
It's just down on Old Pooney Road, which is like a stone's throw from Waikanae Beach, basically. So we get a lot of people coming up after they've been out on the surf, like literally just come in their wetsuits. So yeah, it's pretty close to the beach, on Old Pooney Road, basically. And
is it open during the winter months as well, Huff?
Yeah, we're open every day of the week.
Nice.
Yeah, so yeah.
Huff,
just come down, check it out.
Congratulations, mate, on those 2 New World gongs. They're well deserved. You know, we mentioned Michael Donaldson briefly as well, and you know, in the days past, he's called you the king of saisons in New Zealand. You know, and Michael's not a person to give platitudes. You know, if he says something like that, it's a real stamp of you know, legitimateness, I think. And
I'll take King of Saison. I think King of IPA was already taken, so.
I'm talking to that guy a little bit later this morning, actually. So, buddy, thanks again so much. It's been great to see you, mate. I can't wait to get to Gisborne, Old Pooney Road there, and come check the brewery out sometime.
Yeah, mate.
Thank you.
I'll look after you.
Thank you, bro. I look forward to it, mate.
Oh, I'm probably gonna come up. I'm gonna come up and check out the Huapai Brew Buddy thing probably in a couple of weeks, mate. So I'll keep you in the loop, and we should have some beersies together.
I think it's unavoidable, Huff. Thanks so much, mate.
You're welcome, mate.
Buddy. Thank you.
Cheers, mate. Catch you later.
See you, buddy.